The following is a preview recording of the first 3 chapters of Redwall by Brian Jacques, narrated by Mari Lensenmayer. Who says that I am dead knows not at all. I am that is 2 mice within Redwall. The warrior steps twixt hall and cavern hole. I am that is, take on my mighty role. Look for the sword in the moonlight streaming forth, at night when day's first hour reflects the north. From o'er the threshold seek, and you will see. I am that is, my sword will wield for thee. It was the start of the summer of the late rose. Mossflower country shimmered gently in a peaceful haze, bathing delicately at each dew-laden dawn, blossoming through the high sunny noontides, and languishing in each crimson-tinted twilight that heralded the soft darkness of June nights. Redwall stood 4 square along the marches of the old south border, flanked on 2 sides by mossflower wood's shaded depths. The other half of the abbey overlooked undulating sweeps of meadowland, in its ancient gate facing the long, dusty road on the above-western perimeter. From above, it resembled a fabulous dusky jewel, fallen between a green mantle of light silk and dark velvet. The first mice had built the abbey of red sandstone quarried from pits many miles away in the northeast. The abbey building was covered across its south face by that type of ivy known as Virginia creeper. The onset of autumn would turn the leaves into a cape of fiery hue, thus adding further glory to the name and legend of Redwall Abbey. Book 1. The Wall. Chapter 1. Matthias cut a comical little figure as he wobbled his way along the cloisters, with his large sandals flip-flopping and his tail peeping from beneath the baggy folds of an oversized novice's habit. He paused to gaze upwards at the cloudless blue sky and tripped over the enormous sandals. Hazelnuts scattered out upon the grass from the rush basket he was carrying them in. Unable to stop, he went tumbling, cowl over tail. Bump! The young mouse squeaked in dismay. He rubbed tenderly at his damp, snub nose while slowly taking stock of where he had landed, directly at the feet of Abbot Mortimer. Immediately, Matthias scrambled about on all 4s, hastily trying to stuff nuts back into the basket as he muttered clumsy apologies, avoiding the stern gaze of his elder. Sorry, Father Abbot. I tripped, you see. Trod on my abbot, Father Abbot. Oh, dear, I mean, The Father Abbot blinked solemnly over the top of his glasses. Matthias again. What a young buffoon of a mouse. Only the other day he had singed old brother Methuselah's whiskers while lighting candles. The elder's stern expression softened. He watched the little novice rolling about on the grass, grappling with large armfuls of the smooth hazelnuts which constantly seemed to escape his grasp. Shaking his old gray head, yet trying to hide a smile, Abbot Mortimer bent and helped to gather up the fallen nuts. "Oh, Matthias, Matthias, my son," he said wearily, "when will you learn to take life a little slower, to walk with dignity and humility? How can you ever hope to be accepted as a mouse of Redwall when you are always dashing about, grinning from whisker to tail like a mad rabbit?" Matthias tossed the last of the hazelnuts into the basket and stood awkwardly, shuffling his large sandals in the grass. How could he say aloud what was in his heart? The abbot put his paw around the young mouse's shoulder, sensing his secret yearnings, for he had ruled Redwall wisely over a great number of years and gained much experience of mouse life. He smiled down at his young charge and spoke kindly to him. "Come with me, Matthias. It is time we talked together." A curious thrush, perching in a gnarled pear tree, watched the two figures make their way at a sedate pace in the direction of the great hall. One clad in a dark, greeny-brown robe of the order, the other garbed in the lighter green of a novice. They conversed earnestly in low tones. Thinking what a clever bird he was, the thrush swooped down on the basket that had been left behind. Twisters! The basket contained only hard nuts, locked tight within their shells. Feigning lack of interest, lest any other bird had been witness to his silly mistake, he began whistling jauntily a few bars of his melodious summer song, strolling nonchalantly over to the cloister walls in search of snails. It was cool inside Great Hall. Sunlight flooded down in slanting, rainbow-hued shafts from the high, narrow, stained-glassed windows. A million colored dust motes danced and swirled as the two mice trod the ancient stone floor. The Father Abbot halted in front of the wall which hung a long tapestry. This was the pride and joy of Redwall. The oldest part had been woven by the founders of Redwall Abbey, but each successive generation has added to it. Thus the tapestry was not only a priceless treasure, but was also a magnificent chronicle of early Redwall history. The abbot studied the wonderment in Matthias's eyes as he asked him the question, the answer to which the wise mouse already knew. "What are you looking at, my son?" Matthias pointed to a figure woven into the tapestry. It was a heroic-looking mouse, with a fearless smile on his handsome face. Clad in armor, he leaned casually on an impressive sword, while behind him foxes, wild cats, and vermin fled in terror. The young mouse gazed in admiration. "Oh, Father Abbot," he sighed, "if only I could be like Martin the warrior. He was the bravest, most courageous mouse that ever lived." The abbot sat down slowly on the cool stone floor, resting his back against the wall. "Listen to what I say, Matthias. You have been like a son to me ever since you first came to our gates as an orphaned woodland mouse, begging to be taken in. Come, sit by me, and I will try to explain to you what our order is all about. We are mice of peace. Oh, I know that Martin was a warrior mouse, but those were wild days when strength was needed. The strength of a champion such as Martin. He arrived here in the deep winter when the founders were under attack from many foxes, vermins, and a great wildcat. So fierce a fighter was Martin that he faced the enemy single-pawed, driving them mercilessly far from Mossflower. During the rout, Martin fought a great battle against overwhelming odds. He emerged victorious after slaying the wildcat with his ancient sword, which became famous throughout the land. But in that last bloody combat, Martin was seriously wounded. He lay injured in the snow until mice found him. They brought him back to the abbey and cared for his hurts until he regained his strength. Then something seemed to come over him. He was transformed by what could only be called a mouse miracle. Martin forsook the way of the warrior and hung up his sword. That was when our order found its true vocation. All the mice took a solemn vow never to harm another living creature unless it was an enemy that sought to harm our order by violence. They vowed to heal the sick, care for the injured, and give aid to the wretched, and impoverished. So it was written, and so it has been through all the ages of mousekind since. Today we are deeply honored and highly respected society. Anywhere we go, even far beyond Mouseflower, we are treated with courtesy by all creatures. Even predators will not harm a mouse who wears the habit of our order. They know he or she is one who will heal and give aid. It is an unwritten law that Redwall mice can go anywhere, through any territory, and pass unharmed. At all times, we must live up to this. It is our way, our very life. As the abbot spoke, so his voice increased in volume and solemnity. Matthias sat under his stern gaze, completely humbled. Abbot Mortimer stood and put a wrinkled old paw lightly on the small head, right between the velvety ears, now drooping with shame. Once more the abbot's heart softened towards the little mouse. Poor Matthias, alas for your ambitions. The day of the warrior is gone, my son. We live in peaceful times, thank heaven. And you need only think of obeying me, your abbot, and doing as you are bidden. In time to come, when I am long gone to rest, you will think back to this day and bless my memory, for then you will be a true member of Redwall. Come now, my young friend, cheer up. It is the summer of the late rose. There are many, many days of warm sun ahead of us. Go back and get your basket of hazelnuts. Tonight we have a great feast to celebrate. My golden jubilee as abbot. When you've taken the nuts to the kitchen, I have a special task for you. Yes, indeed, I'll need someone to fish for dinner. Get your rod and line. Tell Brother Alf that he is to take you fishing in the small boat. That's what young mice like doing, isn't it? Who knows? You may lead a fine trout or some sticklebacks. Run along now, young one. Happiness filled Matthias from tail to whiskers as he bobbed a quick bow to his superior and shuffled off. Smiling benignly, the abbot watched him go. Little rascal. He must have a word with the almoner to see if some sandals could be found that were the right fit for Matthias. Small wonder the poor mouse kept tripping up. Chapter 2. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was coming. He was big and tough, an evil rat with ragged fur and curved, jagged teeth. He wore a black eye patch. His eye had been torn out in a battle with a pike. Clooney lost an eye. The pike had lost its life. Some said that Clooney was a Portuguese rat. Others said he came from the jungles far across the wide oceans. Nobody knew for sure. Clooney was a bilge rat, the biggest, most savage rodent that ever jumped from ship to shore. He was black, with gray and pink scars all over his huge, sleek body, from the tip of his wet nose up past his green and yellow slitted eye, across both his mean, tattered ears, down the length of his heavy, vermin-ridden back, to the enormous whip-like tail, which had earned him the title Clooney the Scourge. Now he rode on the back of a hay wagon within his 500 followers, a mighty army of rats, sewer rats, tavern rats, water rats, dockside rats. Clooney's army, fearing yet following him. Redtooth, His second-in-command carried a long pole. This was Clooney's personal standard. The skull of a ferret was fixed at its top. Clooney had killed the ferret. He feared no living things. Wild-eyed, with the terror of a rat smell in his nostrils, the horse plunged ahead without any driver. Where the hay cart was taking him was of little concern to Clooney. Straight on the panicked horse galloped, past the milestone lodged in the earth at the roadside, heedless of letters graven in the stone. Redwall Abbey, 15 miles. Clooney spat over the edge of the cart at 2 young rabbits playing in a field. Tasty little things. A pity the cart hadn't stopped yet, he thought. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was a god of war. Clooney was coming nearer. Chapter 3. Beneath the great hall of Redwall, candles burned bright in their sconces. This was the cavern hole of the mice. What a night it was going to be. Between them, Matthias and Brother Alf had caught and landed a fully grown grayling. They had fought and played with the big fish for nearly 2 hours, finally wading into the shallows and dragging it to the bank. It was nearly 2 pounds in weight, a tribute to Brother Alf's angling skills combined with the useful muscles of Matthias and their joint enthusiasm. Constance, the badger, had to be called. Gripping the fish in her strong jaws, she followed the 2 mice to the abbey kitchen and delivered their catch for them. Then she made her farewells. They would see her at the Jubilee feast that evening, along with many other Mossflower residents who had been invited to share in the festivities. Brother Alf and Matthias stood proudly beside their catch amid the culinary hustle and bustle until they were noticed by Friar Hugo. Busy as he was, the enormously fat Hugo, who would have no other title but that of friar, stopped what he was doing, wiping the perspiration from his brow with a dandelion that he had held in his tail. He waddled about inspecting the fish. Nice shiny scales, bright eyes, beautifully fresh. Friar Hugo smiled so joyfully that his face disappeared amid deep dimples. He shook Alf by the paw and clasped Matthias heartily on the back as he called out between chuckles, "Bring the white gooseberry wine. Fetch me some rosemary, thyme, beech nuts, and honey, quickly. And now, friends, now!" He squeaked, waving the dandelion wildly in his tail. "I, Hugo, will create a grayling a la Redwall, such as will melt in the mouth of mice. Fresh cream, I need lots of fresh cream. Bring some mint leaves, too." They had left Friar Hugo ranting on, delirious in his joy, as they both went off to bathe and clean up, combing whiskers, curling tails, shining noses, and the 101 other grooming tasks that Redwall mice always performed in preparation for an epic feast. The rafters of Cavern Hole rang out to the excited buzz and laughter of the assembled creatures. Hedgehogs, moles, squirrels, woodland creatures, and mice of all kinds. Field mice, hedge mice, dormice, even a family of poor little church mice. Kindly helpers scurried about to make everybody welcome. "Hello there, Mrs. Church Mouse. Sit the children down, and I'll get them some raspberry cordial. Why, Mr. Bankville, so nice to see you. How's the back? Better now? Good. Try a drop of this peach and elderberry brandy." Matthias's young head was in a whirl. He could not remember being so happy in all of his life. Winifred the otter nudged him. "I say, Matthias, Where's this great grayling that you and old Alf hooked by the claw? I wish I could land a beauty like that. Nearly a 2-pounder, wasn't it? Matthias swelled with pride. Such praise, and from the champion fisher herself, an otter. Tim and Tess, the twin church mouse babes, felt Matthias's strong arm muscles and giggled aloud in admiration. He helped to serve them 2 portions of apple and mint ice cream. Such nice little twins. Was it only 3 months ago that he had helped Sister Stephanie to get them over tail rickets? How they had grown. Abbot Mortimer sat in his carved willow chair, becoming thanks as one by one of the new arrivals laid their simple homemade gifts at his feet. An acorn cup from a squirrel, fishbone combs from the otters, mossy bark sandals made by the moles, and many more fine presents too, numerous to mention. The abbot shook his head in amazement. Even more guests were arriving. He beckoned the friar Hugo to his side. A whispered conference was held. Matthias could only hear snatches of the conversation.
Don't worry, Father Abbot. There will be enough for all.
How are the cellar stocks, Hugo?
Enough to flood the abbey pond, Father.
And nuts? We're not to run short on nuts.
You named them. We've got them. Even candied chestnuts and acorn crunch. We could feed the district for a year.
Dairy produce?
Oh, that. I've got cheddar cheese that 4 badgers couldn't roll, plus 10 other varieties.
Good, good. Thank you, Hugo. Oh, we must thank Alf and young Matthias for their magnificent fish. What fine anglers they are. There's enough to keep the entire abbey going for a week. Excellent mice. Well done. Matthias blushed to his tail's end. The otters! The otters! A loud, jolly cry went up as 3 otters in clown costumes came bounding in. Such acrobatics! They tumbled, balanced, and gyrated, cavorting comically across the laden tabletops without upsetting as much as a single sultana. They ended up hanging from the rafters by a strand of ivy to wild applause. Ambrose Spike the Hedgehog did his party piece. He amazed everyone with feats of legerdemain. Eggs were taken from a squirrel's ear. A young mouse's tail stood up and danced like a snake. The incredible vanishing shell trick was performed in front of a group of little harvest mice who kept squeaking. He's got it hidden in his prickles. But had he? Ambrose made a few mysterious passes and produced the shell straight out of the mouth of an awestruck infant mouse. Was it magic? Of course it was. All activity ceased as the great Joseph bell tolled out 8 o'clock from the abbey belfry. Silently, all the creatures filed to their allotted places. They stood reverently behind the seats with heads lowered. Abbot Mortimer rose and solemnly spread his paws wide, encompassing the festive board. He said the grace. Fur and whisker, tooth and claw, all who enter by our door. Nuts and herbs, leaves and fruits, berries, tubers, plants and roots. Silver fish whose life we take, only for a meal to make. This was followed by a loud and grateful Amen. There was a mass clattering of chairs and scraping of forms as everyone was seated. Matthias found himself next to Tim and Tess on one paw, and Cornflower Field Mouse on the other. Cornflower was a quiet young mouse, but undoubtedly very pretty. She had the longest eyelashes Matthias had ever seen, the brightest eyes, the softest fur, the whitest teeth. Matthias fumbled with a piece of celery and self-consciously turned to see if the twins were coping adequately. You never could tell with these baby church mice. Brother Alf remarked that Friar Hugo had excelled himself, as course after course was brought out to the table. Tender freshwater shrimp garnished with cream and rose leaves, deviled barley pearls and acorn puree, apple and carrot chews, marinated cabbage stalks steeped in cream, white turnip with nutmeg. A chorus of oohs and ahs greeted the arrival of 6 mice, pushing in a big trolley. It was the grayling. Wreaths of aromatic steam drifted around Cavern Hole. The fish had been baked to perfection. Friar Hugo entered with a slight swagger added to his ungainly waddle. He swept off his chef's cap with his tail and announced in a somewhat pompous squeak, "My Lord Abbot, honored guests from Mossflower area, and members of the Abbey. I wish to present my pied de resistance." "Oh, get on with it, Hugo!" After some icy staring about to detect the culprit and several smothered sniggers from around the room, the little fat friar puffed himself up once more and declaimed firmly, "Grayling a la Redwall." Polite but eager applause rippled round as Hugo sliced the fish and placed the first steaming portion onto a platter. With suitable dignity, he presented it to the abbot, who thanked him generously. All eyes were on Father Abbot. He took a dainty fork and loaded precariously with steaming fish. Carefully, he transferred it from plate to mouth. Chewing delicately, he turned his eyes upward and closed them, whiskers a-twitched, jaw working steadily, munching away, his tail curled up, holding a napkin, which neatly wiped his mouth. The abbot's eyes reopened. He beamed like the sun on midsummer morning. "Quite wonderful. Perfectly exquisite. Friar Hugo, you are truly my champion chef. Please serve our guests with your master work." Any